The Legend of Moby Dick, the Great White Whale. Written and narrated by Gary W. Gordon. Part 1. The Great Whale. Deep under the rolling ocean waves, where sunlight broke into tiny beams, and the ocean felt endless, lay the incredible city of Atlantia. This beautiful city rose from the ocean's floor like a magical dream, surrounded by colorful coral, intricate seashells, and a wide variety of undersea animals and plants. Buildings in the city were made of massive, polished coral in dozens of colors and sizes. Homes ranged from 20 feet to over 50 feet in height, while others spread out for businesses. Window openings were round holes in the coral walls to allow people to see out. They allowed the open rooms inside the coral to have a constant, comfortable temperature by letting the ocean's underwater current run through them. The king's palace sat on a hill at the center of the city and was made of polished coral and massive seashells. There were multiple levels to the tall tower that reached high above the other buildings. There were royal gardens of rare undersea plants. In the largest rooms sat the king's throne, with its chair of carved stone, surrounded by glowing coral and massive seashells. Above it were lanterns fueled by magic, with a massive trident positioned above to tell everyone this is the king's throne. On his throne, King Neptune ruled the seas. His long hair, a blend of deep green and blue, floated like shimmering seaweed in the water. Having made countless decisions by a king, his face radiated with wisdom. His piercing blue eyes gave the feeling of the ocean's strength, but they were softened by a kindness that reassured all he looked upon. His mighty frame, broad and powerful, was not concealed by the armor that adorned his body, nor by the regal cape that swept from his shoulders like a mighty wave. The armor was finely crafted in gold, gleaming with silver and opals, etched with symbols of the sea. Atop his head, he wore a magnificent crown forged from rare white gold from the deepest parts of the ocean. It was encrusted with radiant pearls and the deepest green sapphires, along with rare seashells so delicate they appeared translucent. His presence was regal and commanding, the embodiment of the sea's power. But that power was tempered with the heart of a father and protector, a ruler whose strength was matched by his deep sense of responsibility and love for his family and kingdom. The most highly ranked of King Neptune's staff was the king's royal wizard named Atherton Dyak. He was a powerful wizard known throughout the ocean for his deep knowledge of ancient magic. His long hair and flowing beard shimmered like silver, and his dark eyes gave a feeling of intelligence and mystery. Though slightly weathered, his face seemed dark, resistant to aging. His entire being radiated with faint glow, hinting at magical energy that surrounded and flowed through him. With a deep connection to the ocean and its magic, he served as a trusted advisor to King Neptune. But many were cautious around him. They could never determine what lay behind that smile that almost looked evil at times. The wizard made a very powerful weapon for the king. Using an ancient spell, he forged a trident of materials found only in forbidden parts of the ocean, materials imbued with ancient magic. With this, the king had the power to protect his kingdom and command the ocean itself. With such incredible power, Neptune was still at heart a father. He had a son whose name was Karith. Neptune had lost his wife when his son was born. Though he missed her, he was always reminded of her when he looked at his son's face, which bore a strong resemblance to his wife. Prince Karith was a timid boy. His smaller stature, quiet nature, made him stand out from the others in the palace and at school. He had soft, wavy hair that floated gently in the water and large, curious blue eyes that seemed to take in everything around him. Unlike his father, Karith preferred not to be noticed. Instead, he watched and listened rather than drawing attention to himself. Due to his shy nature, there was a gentle kindness to him, and many believed that hidden within him was a strength yet to be discovered. The king's master wizard also had a son, Moby. Moby matched the king's son in age and physique. Perhaps that is what allowed them to become fast friends. Both also shared the same trait, a sense of adventure they longed for. His wispy dark hair framed his youthful face. Moby's eyes were deep green and seemed to sparkle with curiosity and a hint of wonder. More than that, they seemed to flash with hints of energy, or maybe it was magic. With what people saw in his eyes, many people suspected he had inherited some of his father's magic. Unlike his father, though, he had a gentle smile that made others feel comfortable around him. Growing up together, Moby grew to share a deep bond with Karith. They spent their youth in and around the palace. The king enjoyed watching them play, and if time permitted, would join in with the boys in their games and would tell them some of his many adventures. Those stories the boys used to create their own fantastic imaginary journeys. Even as they approached being teenagers, both had not grown much in stature. As with all royalty, Karith received special training by the royal guards, and he made sure that Moby was included in the training. That training increased their strength, speed, and knowledge of combat skills that went far beyond their classmates. Bullies at school liked to pick on Moby since he was smaller, especially when Karith wasn't there. For they knew who Karith's father was and didn't want to make him or his father angry. However, there were a few teenagers who went out of their way to taunt and make fun of Moby every chance they could, until the day that Moby had the opportunity to use his training to teach them a lesson. 4 older teenagers had cornered Moby in a deserted classroom. It was apparent to Moby that they wanted to continue their bullying, calling him names and pushing him around, saying he will never be a man like they will. When their leader, the largest boy, reached out to grab Moby's arm, Moby's training kicked in. Moby quickly pulled his arm back from the outreached hand of his opponent. With his other hand, he firmly grabbed the wrist of the boy's extended arm and forced the arm upward. With his free hand, he pushed on the boy's chest and quickly spun his body, allowing his foot to strike against the boy's ankle. With a hard push, Moby was able to make the boy lose balance and fall to the ground with a heavy thud. The boy quickly realized that he had underestimated Moby as he grabbed his injured arm that had struck the floor. Moby quickly regained his posture, ready for another attack. But after seeing how quickly and unexpectedly Moby had disabled him, the other boys glanced at each other and rushed for the door, leaving their friend agonizing on the floor. After that, the taunts and attempts at making fun of Moby stopped. He could only determine that the word had spread, and he was no longer one to be trifled with. Karith had also heard of what happened that day, and was proud that Moby was able to defend himself. Both he and his defense instructor congratulated Moby, who thought he would have some fun using the same techniques on Karith. But Karith knew Moby and was ready for the fake attack. Karith did not give Moby a chance to show off his skills, as Karith quickly used a spin kick to throw Moby off balance. The instructor smiled and all had a good laugh. Karith continued to be Moby's closest friend, but was never quite sure that he could be a king like his famous father, especially whenever he considered his smaller size and timid nature. At 16, Moby and Karith decided to have some fun and explore outside the city. In the dark of night, they took a pair of the king's great seahorse stallions, their scales glistening like gold in the dim light. Together, they hitched the seahorses to a huge, beautifully carved seashell that served as one of the royal chariots. They had a lot of fun that evening, exploring far outside the city. But upon their return, there was a stern look on the king's face. But that only lasted for a few moments. The king smiled and quietly told the boys he had done the same thing when he was younger than they were. One day, Moby was exploring outside the city by himself when he heard a strange, low rumble echo through the water. He turned around and saw flashes of light bursting from the city. The city had massive arches that were used as official entrances. At those arches were always a battalion of guards ready to defend if needed. As Moby swam toward one of the arches, he was confused that there were no guards to be seen. He swam beneath the massive arch and quickly determined that the loud sounds and bright flashes were coming from the king's palace at the center of the city. His heart pounded as he quietly approached the palace. He watched in horror as a large group of fierce mermen charged toward the palace gates. Their spears glowed with menacing energy, and their war cries echoed through the city's normally quiet waters. Moby couldn't believe it. They were attacking the palace. Hovering above the angry merman was a tall figure cloaked in a dark robe and hood. The water around him flashed and swirled from the energy radiating from the man. Moby's eyes widened with recognition when he saw who the man was. He refused to believe what he was seeing. It was his own father. The master wizard, whom Moby had always known to be calm but stern, now appeared fierce and resolute. His dark face showed a grimacing look that scared Moby. Motioning with his hands, Atherton summoned an ancient force that rose up through the sand from beneath the city. It was a glowing mist and drifted silently toward the unsuspecting palace guards. Its soft, flickering strands looked like long, ghostly images in the water. One by one, it reached out for the guards and any citizen that came close. As it touched them, their faces lost all emotion, as if lulled into a deep trance. Moby watched as their faces changed, evident of the rage that now filled them. Their movements slowed, and without resistance, they joined the swelling ranks of the attacking army, their loyalty to the king and the city overtaken by the powerful magic. Moby trembled as he realized what was happening. His father was using magic to control the people, forcing them to fight against the palace guards and anyone who got in their way. The once peaceful streets of Atlantia had turned chaotic, filled with shouts, the clashes of weapons, and the menacing hum of dark magic. Moby could hardly breathe as he watched his father raise his staff high above him, and a wicked grin spread across his dark face. A great wave of magic surged out from the staff, crashing against the unmoving palace doors like a raging current, shaking the very foundation of the underwater city. Moby was unaware that his father had always been jealous of the king's power and wanted to be king himself. After seeing what his father was doing, Moby rushed to find the king's son and tell him what he had seen, that it was his own father commanding ancient magic to attack the king, his palace, and the people of the city. When Karith heard what was happening, he knew he must warn his father of the danger and swam straight for the palace. On his way there, several of the guards of the attacking army attempted to capture him. Karith fought valiantly, using the skills he had learned. Trying his best, they overpowered him and bound his hands with heavy cord, then paraded and threatened him in front of the palace as the king watched in horror. Moby was filled with anger. He saw Karith treated horribly. He saw people he knew, changed by magic, turn against their own friends and family. He saw his father leading the attack on the palace. Then he remembered something he had once read in one of his father's oldest books on ancient magic. That book had forbidden spells because it was dark magic, harmful to those it was used on. As Moby swam away from the battlefield to find his father's secret library, Karith saw him and was confused as to why Moby was leaving and did not try to help him. Moby was almost captured twice as he made his way there. Only the guards' training kept him from being taken prisoner. His father's library was hidden deep beneath the king's palace. To get there, Moby had to first open a secret door inside the palace his father had shown him, swim through twisting hallways lit by glowing, stinging jellyfish. He opened the door and entered. Moby heard the door close behind him and knew what lay ahead, a maze of corridors protected by all manner of beasts, creatures, and spells. He found himself looking at a long line of glowing jellyfish that floated in the corridor in front of him. He knew they were dangerous. One sting could hurt a person, 2 could paralyze, and 3 could bring death. The only way to pass by them was to use magic words to calm them, so he could pass and go down the passage safely. He spoke the words, and the jellyfish stopped moving. He cautiously approached one to see if it would sting him. He was relieved that it did not move. He quickly swam forward, relieved to have passed all the jellyfish. He turned around to see the jellyfish coming back to life and breathed with a heavy sigh of relief as he remembered the magic words only had a temporary effect on them. There were other dangerous creatures used to guard passages that Moby had to swim through. He had to remember which spell to use to keep the dangerous guardians calm. For he knew without them, these dangerous creatures could kill all who came close. The walls of the passages were smooth, dark stone, decorated with swirling designs and symbols of magic. The further he swam toward the library, the more complicated the symbols on the walls became. Moby knew the symbols, for they told him which passage to follow to find his father's library. All the passages formed a complex maze. Unless you knew where to go, knew which passage to take, the creatures would prey on anyone who entered the wrong one. He also knew there were corridors that looked unguarded, but were protected by spells that would trap them there forever. As Moby finally reached the library's entrance, he thought about the room. He had been there many times before, but it was always his father who opened the door. Only once he had seen his father retrieve and hide the key that unlocked the great stone door. With that in mind, Moby hoped he could find the key. Without it, there was no way to enter the room. There was hidden in all the symbols on the wall a tiny circle. Pressing the circle would allow a small opening to appear in the wall that hid the key. The opening matched the symbols surrounding it to further protect its location. Inside the opening, Moby could see coral, rough and jagged. Moby knew of the coral, for it was poisonous, making it dangerous to put your hand in there. But Moby also knew the trick to retrieve the key. Instead of reaching in to get past the coral, he reached up to find the key hanging there. Moby was very relieved that one of his fingers found what he was after. He could feel the intricate patterns on the key, its head shaped like a spiral seashell, and he could feel a slight vibration coming from the key as he touched it. Withdrawing the key, Moby looked for the small keyhole he saw his father use. The keyhole could only be seen on a wall if you were holding the key. There it was, the opening he looked for. It was mixed in with symbols on the wall, and it took him a moment to recognize it. Moby remembered seeing his father use the key in the lock, but Moby had to remember to keep the key with him after he unlocked the door. Without it, the magic in the open door would not let him pass, even if the door was open. Moby cautiously inserted the key into the keyhole. He remembered he must turn it a certain way. It was like solving a puzzle. He turned the key halfway left, then a full turn right, then tilted the back of the key upwards. He was very relieved to find the key turned easily inside the lock. A sharp, glowing outline of a large door appeared on a blank wall, as if waiting to be opened. He was glad he remembered to remove the key before approaching the door. The heavy stone door was now covered with many magic carvings and strange letters that glowed. Moby pushed on the door, trying to open it. The great stone door at first did not want to seem to move. He pushed harder, and with a final push, the heavy door opened wide enough for him to enter the room. The sides of the door frame glowed, making him nervous. He wondered if this was some type of alarm or protection against intruders. He found himself in his father's library, where he had seen many experiments performed. There were many odd-looking mechanisms that never seemed to stop spinning or clicking. He saw dozens of glass jars filled with moving liquids that glowed in different colors. On one wall, there was a collection of large glass jars that contained different types of animals that he was not familiar with. As he reached his hand out to touch one of the jars, the animal inside started moving and attacked the jar where Moby's hand was. Moby could see the sharp teeth and claws it had, and it was clear to him that he needed to avoid these jars and their occupants. He saw a large locked metal box covered with ancient letters. Moby inserted the door key into the lock and turned it, hearing a single click. He knew he must stop turning the key at the sound. He removed the key and slowly lifted the heavy lid. Inside was an orb that glowed with powerful energy that sent out pulsating rings of force that Moby could feel. Had he continued to look at it, his strength would have left him, and he would have fallen into a deep, eternal sleep. Moby knew this, and looked at it only for a moment. He was already feeling weak just from the one glance. "I wonder if this is what my father used to create Neptune's trident," whispered Moby to himself. Moby closed the lid and locked it. As he did, he felt his strength returning. He continued to examine the room. That box was not what he was after. Moby was getting worried that his father would catch him there. So he started to swim to the door to leave. But that is when he saw the strange-looking book sitting on a shelf by itself. It was thicker than the other books, and much older-looking, with his father's handwriting on it. He recognized the book. It was the one Moby hoped to find. It was the one he saw his father read from to perform his most powerful magic spells. Moby removed the book from its shelf. He had forgotten how heavy it was. He set it on a close-by table and tried to open the book, but it would not open. Then he remembered his father had cast a spell on the book. Only when using the correct magic words would that book ever open. Moby had seen his father open it, and spoke the same words his father used. "Anonkarith Koshikwa." He heard a small clicking sound coming from inside the book, as if a hidden lock had just opened. Moby lifted the front cover to open it. As he watched, symbols on the first page appeared, and then seemed to come to life, moving constantly, changing shapes. Moby's father had trained him in the ways of magic since he was a child, and now Moby remembered every lesson. He watched as the pages seemed to come to life, quickly turning one by one on their own. He knew that the spell he was looking for was somewhere in the book, but to find it, he had to be patient. He waited as the pages stopped turning and watched as the first page appeared again. The symbols on it spun and moved across the page. Then one familiar mark appeared, the one his father had shown him a long time ago. Moby reached out and touched the glowing symbol, his finger gently pressing the page as he moved the symbol in the pattern shown to him by his father. Instantly, the spinning symbols froze, and he lifted his hand. The book responded as the next page opened on its own. More symbols filled the next page, creating ever-changing patterns. Moby waited, his heart pounding. He knew each page had one more symbol than the previous one. This being the second page, there were 2 symbols to select and move, but he had to select each symbol in the right order. He carefully touched the first symbol and moved it to where it needed to be on the page. Then he touched the second symbol and moved it. As before, the next page turned on its own, revealing more symbols. Page after page this continued. With each new page, Moby had to keep selecting the right symbols in the correct order. When the 10th page finally flipped open, Moby selected and moved all 10 symbols to their correct positions. The symbols faded, and all Moby saw were blank, empty pages. Moby closed his eyes and focused, calming his mind as he concentrated on the magic he had learned. He remembered the magic words and whispered them quietly. Slowly, as if drawn by invisible hands, words began to appear on the blank page, glowing as if they were being burned into the paper. At first, Moby saw many spells, each powerful and strange. But none were what he was looking for. He kept reading page after page until finally there it was, the spell his father had told him about. It was the one of transformation that would turn him into any animal he chose. But what he wanted to become was a whale, because it was the largest creature in the seas and could help the most against the invading army. But this was not to be just any whale. This spell would turn him into something much more powerful, something ancient and unstoppable. This one would be white, a symbol of old magic. It would be larger, more powerful, faster than any whale known. Moby also knew that the spell would protect him from all harm. With the spell's protection and the size and strength of a magical whale, no army, no matter how large, could stand against it. But there was a catch to the spell. Once transformed, he would be that way forever. He paused, but only for a moment. That scared him at first, but he knew he must save his friend, and no matter what happened, it would be worth the price. He started to read the words, and then remembered the warning his father told him. This spell used black magic, powerful and forbidden. It was powered by anger. The angrier he got, the bigger, more powerful he would become. Moby took a deep breath and cautiously spoke the words written on the ancient page. But nothing happened. Then he remembered that casting a spell like this meant using a stern, strong voice with conviction. He took a deep breath and again spoke the words, but this time firmly. As he did, he thought of all those years of being made fun of for being smaller. All the times he felt angry at those who treated him and his friend badly. He thought of all the people of the city who were being forced to do his father's bidding. Then he remembered how his best friend, now a prisoner, was being tormented and paraded in front of everyone, in front of his father, the king. That was the strongest emotion of them all. That was when he felt his body begin to change. Moby could feel it, the strange sensation of growing larger with every heartbeat. The surge of power rushing through him, spreading through every part of his body. His sleek, muscular tail, which had once been perfect for swimming, was quickly growing larger. He began to feel far more powerful than anything he had ever imagined. He felt his hands melt away, his arms stretching and flattening into massive fins. His once small merman body expanded into a colossal whale-like trunk. His face elongated, his nose shrunk into nothing, leaving only his eyes and a wide mouth. He was surprised to feel nothing as he changed. He wondered if the magic was protecting him from any sense of pain. Everything around him seemed to shrink. The room, once large and spacious, was suddenly feeling very small and getting smaller with each moment. Moby's heart raced as he realized what was happening. He was quickly growing into a whale, and the space in the room was shrinking at an alarming rate. The great door he had entered was now far too small for him to use. His body was filling every corner of the room. Panic set in. The ceiling was getting dangerously close. He glanced up, knowing that if he didn't act fast, he'd be trapped. Desperate, Moby took a deep breath and summoning all the strength of his powerful new body, he pushed off the floor with incredible force toward the ceiling. The building shook, then shattered as pieces exploded in all directions. He burst through the roof, and the ground above surrounded by a cloud of rubble and debris, his massive form racing upward like a missile. It took him a moment to realize how easily he had crashed through the roof and the ground that covered the library. He forced himself to slow down and stop to see where he was. He had soared high above the city and saw pieces of the building and ground still raining down below him. The massive hole left in the ground where he had made his escape was just outside the palace walls. He hovered there for a moment, stunned by what he saw. He had successfully used the spell, and now it was time to see what he could do. High above the city, Moby looked down at the battlefield surrounding the palace. Warriors were shooting weapons at people and buildings. People were fighting each other. Moby felt angry at what he saw, and with that, he felt the power inside him increase as his anger grew. He saw Neptune standing in front of the palace, using his trident, shooting powerful energy bolts through the water directed at the invading army and eventually towards the one controlling them. However, the wizard was using the same magic as the trident to command his army and defend himself. The wizard's magic deflected many of the mighty energy blasts from the king's trident, as most never reached their intended targets. By this time, Moby's transformation was complete. No longer the small merman he once was, he had become a colossal whale, towering and unstoppable force. He could feel the magic's power in every muscle. His huge shadow stretched across the seabed, dwarfing the buildings below. Judging by his shadow, he had grown to more than twice the size of the largest whale he had ever seen. He gazed down at the remains of the shattered ruins of the building he had burst from, marveling at the sheer power now flowing through his body. It was the sound of the battle below that quickly shifted Moby's attention to what needed to be done. The battlefield surrounded the palace and was filled with clashing forces, defenders of the city fighting desperately against the invading army led by his father. The realization hit Moby once again like a crashing wave. Then someone caught his eye. It was his father approaching someone on the battlefield. He approached Karith, who was struggling against his bonds. Moby watched in shock as his father struck his friend with the staff. Karith winced and fell to the ground. The king, watching from the palace steps, stood frozen in disbelief. It was not easy for Moby to see the look of fear on the king's face. That was all Moby needed to see. In that instant, everything became clear. His father's betrayal, the attack on the city, the battles between people of the city. Moby knew what he had to do. In a sudden, powerful thrust of his massive tail, Moby sped through the water. The ocean boiled around him as he swam, his massive body creating powerful currents as he raced with terrifying speed. He swam away from the palace to get some distance so he could turn around and build speed to increase the force of his attack. He aimed for the palace where the battle raged the most. His new strength turned every movement of his massive body into an unstoppable force. On his way to the palace, nothing could slow him. Buildings crumbled as he crashed through them or swam by them. Entire buildings shattered like glass under the momentum of his body, or the furious, swirling water left in his wake. The city shook with each impact of a building, leaving the wake of debris flying in the water behind him. As he raced to the palace, he did not see the old woman as one of the buildings started to fall toward her. Those fighting at the palace must have felt something, because they all stopped fighting each other at the same time to see what it was. The tremors in the water seemed to come from everywhere and grew stronger by the second. Everyone turned to look for the source. Their eyes widened with fear and surprise. A massive white whale, larger than any creature they had ever seen, was charging straight at the invaders. Moby rushed by the palace guards towards them. His eyes blazed with anger. The attacking army froze in fear as they saw the monster pass by the palace guards and head straight towards them. Some dropped their weapons and swam away as fast as they could. Others froze in place, not sure what to do. It was clear no one could escape the sight of that great whale barreling toward them. The battlefield now fallen silent with the whale's approach. Moby, furious and unstoppable, was barreling straight towards the terrified army that had been attacking the city. He charged and tore through them as if they were small toys. His great tail swept away the attacking army in all directions behind him. The mermen and their weapons of war were no match for the whale. They scattered in all directions, trying to evade it, but they could not swim fast enough. The wake of Moby racing through the water was strong enough to match the greatest hurricanes above the seas. With his speed, size, and great strength, no one could stand against the raging whale. The wizard was horrified as he saw his army vanishing before his eyes. He turned to face the whale, who had stopped its charge and was now looking at the wizard. He was determined to stop this whale and tried to use his magic against it. But he quickly found out that it had no effect on the great whale. The whale continued towards the wizard as if his magic had not been used at all. The angrier the wizard got, the more magic he cast at Moby. He was confused why his magic did not stop or even destroy the whale. What he did not know was where the whale came from. Had he known, he would have tried to make his escape. He knew that someone who had been transformed by ancient magic was immune to his magic spells. The mighty bolts of energy thrown by the wizard only made the whale angrier. This made him grow even more. Furious, Moby swam in a great circle high above the wizard, who was now enraged that an animal had robbed him of his victory. He used every curse and spell he knew on it. He watched as it swam faster and faster, its huge tail whipping through the water, turning it into a huge underwater whirlpool. The swirling water formed towering walls, spinning violently. The powerful vortex raged like a storm beneath the sea, its force pulling everything close towards its dark center. Suddenly, Moby turned sharply, swam up, and charged straight down into the middle of the whirling vortex. The vortex exploded, sending massive waves of powerful currents racing in all directions. The first wave hit the invading army, tossing soldiers around like toys, their armor clanging as they were swept away. A second wave followed, even stronger, dragging them further into the ocean, slamming them into rocks and coral. The wizard tried to protect his army, raising a glowing shield with his magic. But the waves were too strong. One after another, the powerful waves crashed down, breaking the protective shield and shattering the last of the soldiers into the swirling depths of the ocean. Moby's fury had turned the battlefield into a watery disaster, leaving no escape for those who had been attacking the city. The force created by Moby was also guided straight down, toward his own father. When it struck the ground where the wizard stood, it was as if the ground exploded. As the seabed sand finally began to settle, Moby's father was nowhere to be seen. It was then that Moby suddenly noticed something that made his heart stop. His mother's limp body, partially buried beneath the ruins of one of the buildings he had destroyed in his rage. The realization hit him like a wave crashing down. He had destroyed a building that had fallen and killed his own mother. A deep, crushing guilt swallowed him. But it quickly twisted into even more rage at himself. His grief-fueled anger boiled over, and he lashed out at the city with uncontrollable force and rage. Moby demolished everything in his path. Even the largest buildings crumbled like sandcastles against a watery wave as he tore through them. The city, once his home, was quickly becoming a pile of ruins under that unstoppable rage. From the now empty battlefield, Neptune himself, king of the seas, rose to confront the whale, wielding his mighty trident. The king, with all his power, aimed to stop the beast. His trident hurled its divine energy as it crackled through the water. But it was no use. Moby had grown too large, too powerful. The trident, a weapon feared by all, had no effect on the whale. Energy bolts bounced off the whale, for the trident's power was no match for the creature Moby had become. From a distance, Karith watched the clash unfold, his eyes wide with horror. The battle between his father and the monstrous whale shook the sea. Karith's mind raced. He suddenly remembered a conversation long ago when Moby had spoken of a powerful spell that could transform anyone into any animal. The pieces began to fall into place, and Karith's heart sank. He had seen Moby swim away when he was captured. Now it all made sense. This massive, furious creature, it was Moby. His best friend had used that spell on himself and became the unstoppable force now threatening to destroy everything. Determined to help, Karith swam toward the massive whale, hoping to reach his friend buried deep within the raging beast. He called out, but he was not heard. Moby, lost in his destructive fury, didn't see his friend. With one powerful swing of his massive tail, he accidentally struck Karith. Moby watched as the impact sent his friend spiraling through the water. His limp body slowly drifted downwards and gently landed on the sea floor. Moby's heart almost stopped, and the blinding rage inside him quickly began to fade. He recognized the face instantly. It was Karith, his best friend, who lay motionless on the ground, surrounded by debris from damaged buildings and war. Horror washed over him like a cold wave. In his fury, he had hurt the one person he had been trying to save. In the middle of the ruined undersea city, amidst the crumbled buildings and swirling debris, the monstrous white whale hovered motionless above the limp body of his friend lying on the sand below. The battlefield was now a silent and eerie graveyard of destruction. Neptune, king of the sea, had seen his son fall. He came and knelt beside him. His face, usually stern and mighty, was now filled with sorrow as he gently lifted Karith into his arms. The ocean seemed to hold its breath. From far above, a single pale beam of sunlight pierced the ocean's waters, cutting through the gloom and casting a soft light on the king and the limp body he held. The light flickered as it touched them, as if the sun itself wept for the scene below. And there, in that moment of silence, the great whale, once filled with so much rage and unstoppable fury, floated helpless, his heart breaking as he watched the king holding his friend he had hurt. Moby slowly swam toward the spot where his friend lay, his enormous body casting a long shadow over the broken city. As he approached, he looked at Neptune, the mighty king of the sea. But the king's face was not filled with rage or vengeance, as Moby had feared. Instead, it was the face of a father, grief-stricken. His features were softened by deep sorrow, unlike anything Moby had ever seen before on the king. Neptune cradled Karith's limp body in his mighty arms, his strong hands trembling slightly, not with anger, but with worry and heartache. The king, once so powerful, now appeared fragile and hurt. When he looked up at the massive whale, Neptune's gaze met Moby's. Neptune saw no hatred in the whale's eyes, no fury, no anger. Instead, he saw something unexpected in those eyes. Where once those eyes had shown anger, he now saw confusion and sorrow. In them he saw a soul, lost and tormented by regret. But there was something more the king saw. He thought he saw small flashes in those huge eyes. It was all too much for Moby to bear. The crushing guilt of what he had done, the destruction he had caused, was overwhelming him. With one last sorrowful glance at Karith and Neptune, Moby turned and quietly swam away, his massive body moving with a heaviness from the regret that now filled him. He knew that no matter where he went, he would always carry the weight of having killed his own mother and now his best friend, the king's son. As Moby faded into the distance, the king's men rushed after the whale, weapons ready. They were prepared to strike down the great beast no matter the cost. But Neptune raised his hand and waved them off. "Stop," his deep voice commanded. The soldiers were confused, but obeyed. "Let it leave." I saw in its eyes a sadness that was as deep as the ocean. Whatever drove it to do what it did here has left it. Maybe one day we'll know what happened. But for now, we need to care for my son in the city. Neptune watched as the whale faded away into the ocean's depths and turned his attention to his son. Neptune thought about the whale. There was something about it, something that was off or even familiar. It was then the king knew. This wasn't just a whale. That flashing in the eyes belonged to only one person, Moby. Many years he had seen those eyes and secretly wondered if the boy had inherited some of his father's magic. Neptune's eyes grew wide with realization. He ran the events of the day over and over in his mind. He had also seen Moby swim away when his son was captured. "By the great seas," he shouted, "that whale was Moby!" His guards looked at each other, wondering what the king was talking about. "Your Majesty, we all know the boy. That monster was not him." But the king quickly and happily cut off the guard. "You all know Moby. What is the one thing that Moby has that no one else in the kingdom has? The one thing we have all wondered about." The guards all looked confused. "What did you always see in his eyes?" he asked them. "I just saw the same thing in the whale's eyes. I saw the same flashes Moby had," he told them. Only Moby had them. He must have used some of his father's powerful magic on himself. I saw the hurt in his face when my son was captured and saw Moby swim away. Not long after, the great beast appeared and immediately started attacking not us, but the enemy. It continued until even the wizard commanding them was gone. He was not here to destroy Atlantia. He was trying to save my son and the city. Neptune's voice softened. "I do not know what madness overtook the whale to drive it to attack the city after the battle. But it is clear there was no madness in the whale when our eyes met." The king continued, "If anyone ever sees the great white whale again, they are to report it to me immediately. I do not know what magic Moby used, but one day we will find a way to reverse the spell that created it and bring him back. But for now, we must care for my son and all those who were injured. We must start to rebuild the city." Part 2. Ahab and the King. Far above the battlefield that was Atlantia, the sea was calm. Captain Ahab was standing on the deck of the ship, the Pequod, staring out at the dark horizon. His hands gripped the wooden railing, his eyes fixed on the endless stretch of ocean. There was a stillness in the air, a quiet that felt heavy with secrets. Ahab had sailed many seas, conquered storms, and faced dangers that most men would flee from. But tonight, the ocean felt somehow different. There was something just beyond the edge of his understanding, something that was eluding him. It was long past sunset, and his crew had turned in for the night. They realized their captain was thinking. Knowing him, they left him alone with his thoughts as the soft waves gently caressed the ship's hull. They knew their captain. Most had been with him for many years. It was easy to tell his mind was restless this quiet evening. Though Ahab was no stranger to the mysteries of the ocean, something about this night unsettled him. It was not the usual uncertainties of the sea, the shifting of tides, or the hidden dangers lurking beneath the surface. No, this was something deeper, something he could not identify. And it bothered him. It was like the ocean itself was holding its breath, waiting, hiding something from him. He had spent most of his life as the whaling captain, hunting the great whales that roamed the seas. The thrill of the chase, the fierce battles, the rush of victory, they were all part of his legacy. But there was always a sense of control, of knowing his place in the endless dance between man and beast. That night, however, the sea felt different, as though it was shifting, waiting, trembling. Ahab leaned forward, narrowing his eyes, gazing intently at the ocean. The moonlight was shimmering on the calm surface, casting a silver glow that stretched far into the distance. He inhaled deeply. The salty air filled his lungs, but even that did little to ease the growing tension he felt inside him. As the ship gently swayed with the rhythm of the waves, Ahab could feel it, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor, as though the sea itself was alive, stirring restlessly beneath him, trying to warn him. He pressed his lips into a thin line, his weathered face creased in thought. "Strange," he muttered to himself, barely above a whisper. "The sea's too calm for what I feel." A man like Ahab knew the ocean better than most men knew the land. He could sense a storm brewing long before clouds gathered, and he knew how the ocean's currents ran. But this feeling was different. This wasn't the warning of a storm or the anticipated chase of a whale. This was something completely different, and it made him uneasy. The ship gave a soft groan as it moved with the waves. The sound was familiar to him, a reminder of countless nights spent alone on the deck while the crew slept below. But tonight, even the ship seemed uneasy. Its creaking more pronounced, the wood seemed to tremble in a way it hadn't before. Ahab shook his head as if trying to dismiss the uneasy feeling. Perhaps it was just fatigue of too many nights at sea. Perhaps the long stretches of hunting without the sight of a whale were wearing on him. But deep down he knew better. This was something out there, something ominous that the ocean was hiding from him. Still, no whale, no matter how massive, had ever caused the ocean to stir like this. Ahab's life had been built on hunting these mighty creatures. Yet nothing in all his years had given him this uneasy feeling of foreboding. His grip on the rail tightened, the wood pressing into his palms. He stared out at the ocean once again, scanning the dark waters for any sign, any clue as to what might be causing the deep feeling in his bones. But he saw nothing, just the vast, empty, calm ocean stretching endlessly into the night. For a moment, he considered calling up one of the crew to help look, but he quickly dismissed the thought. They would not understand. This was not something that could be explained. It was a feeling, something in the air that only he could sense. He stood there silently watching, waiting. And though the night remained quiet, the restless feeling within him only grew stronger. It was a sense that something beneath the surface was stirring, something powerful and unknown. As Moby swam away from the ruins of the city, the ocean felt vast and cold around him. His massive body moved easily through the water with a terrible grace. But inside his heart was heavy. His mind churned with a whirlwind of thoughts and memories and feelings that stung like 1,000 sharp blades. Karith, his best friend, was gone. His lifeless body lying on the ocean floor, struck down by Moby himself, though he had not meant to. The memory of Karith's limp form haunted him. He replayed the scene over and over in his mind, but it was like a dark shadow he could not escape from. And worse, the image of his mother buried beneath the ruins of the city. Her life ended because of his blind fury. Each stroke of his enormous tail drove him further from the city. No matter how far he swam, he couldn't leave behind the crushing weight of guilt. The more he swam, the angrier he became at himself. His chest tightened with every thought, every memory of seeing what he had destroyed. He tried to remember the boy he had been, the quiet, thoughtful son of a wizard. But that boy felt distant now and gone forever. His beating heart was lost beneath layers of fury and sorrow. With each moment, the rage inside him grew. The sea swirled around him as if sensing a coming storm. He swam faster, harder, desperate to outrun the pain. But it was no use. The images of that day kept flashing in his mind. His best friend, his parents, his home was all lost to the monstrous force he had become. The deeper Moby's thoughts plunged into the darkness of regret, the more anger burned until it became a roaring fire inside of him. And then he could take no more. With a furious, sea-shaking cry, Moby screamed as he drove his massive body upwards. He surged toward the water's surface, pushing through the layers of water with terrifying speed, the force of his movement creating whirlpools and waves that tore at the ocean around him. He could feel the water try to resist him, but his rage was stronger. He rose faster and faster, like a great, unstoppable storm. His heart pounded with the weight of all he had lost, and the anger fueled his strength until, crash! With a deafening roar, Moby exploded through the surface of the sea, a fountain of water erupting into the air following him, spraying like a massive geyser. His colossal body, white as moonlight, soared above the waters, and for a moment the entire ocean seemed to tremble in his presence. He let out a terrifying sound so deep and so powerful that it sent ripples far across the ocean's surface. His fury was too great, too immense to be contained, and now it burst forth into the open air. Just as Ahab's restlessness had reached its peak, the ocean before him erupted. Ahab's breath caught in his throat as the massive whale's gleaming white body burst through the surface and fly high into the night air. The moonlight reflected off its smooth skin, casting an eerie glow that made it look like a ghost had risen from the sea. Perhaps the sea was sending him a message, for all the whales he had taken from it. For a moment, the creature seemed to hover above the ocean's surface, its enormous tail suspended above the water, its haunting eyes, dark, deep, and somehow ancient, showed Ahab a world beyond that of men. And then, with a great crash, the mighty whale slammed back into the water, sending waves roaring in every direction. Ahab stood frozen, his eyes wide, his heart racing. He had never seen anything like it. His ship was being tossed about like a child's toy. This creature was beyond anything he could have ever imagined. No whale had reached such a size. It was a force of nature that tore at Ahab's soul. For a moment, the world seemed to stand still. The ocean calmed once more, the waves settled back into their gentle rhythm, as if nothing had happened. Ahab's men raced to the ship's deck to see what had made the ship suddenly shake like it did. They all saw Ahab standing there, but it was the look on his face that terrified them. They saw the look of terror and determination unlike any had seen before. Ahab's mind raced with questions, his pulse quickening with a strange, unfamiliar desire. What he had just seen? Was it real? He didn't know, but the image of the great white whale was burned into his mind forever. And he knew he had to find it again. It would be his. No one would claim that prize but him. He did not understand why, but something deep inside of him had stirred. A need, a longing. The sea, with all its mysteries, had shown him something this night, and Ahab knew he would never be the same. Captain Ahab stood on the bow of his whaling ship. A salty breeze was blowing on his weathered face as he scanned the horizon for another sight of the white whale. He told his crew to keep an eye on the horizon, to look out for the great white whale. But some of them were beginning to wonder if their captain had imagined the whole thing. "Captain!" one of the men shouted, and pointed towards the sea. "There! Look!" All eyes turned quickly to find what was there. Ahab narrowed his gaze and followed the man's outstretched finger. In the distance, the sea shimmered unnaturally, and then it happened again. The water exploded as a giant white form breached the surface in a terrifying display of raw power. Ahab knew it was the same creature, impossibly large, its pale skin glowing against the dark waters. His heart raced. This was no ordinary whale. Devil or not, it would be his. Now his crew had seen for themselves, whispered Ahab to himself, a determined look on his face as he watched his men hurry to their stations. All the men could think of was the rich reward that would come from killing and harvesting such a beast. "Turn the ship! After it!" Ahab ordered, his sharp voice filled with an intensity that hurried the crew. All rushed to their assigned positions, waiting for the captain's commands. The Pequod turned, its sails catching the wind. Ahab's eyes never left the white whale. But something was wrong. It wasn't just swimming. It was thrashing about. Its massive body churned the water in wild, frenzied movements. Moby's mind was still clouded with grief and anger, the memories of Atlantia pulling him deeper into his own turmoil. He was not aware of the whaling ship behind him. Then Moby saw it, the ship. He knew from stories he had heard all his life what this thing was. It killed whales. He had seen it once before when the king showed him and Karith what men of the surface world do. Now one of these terrible things was chasing him. Moby dove into the sea, his giant tail slamming into the waves, trying to escape this new threat that followed him so relentlessly. The Pequod gave chase, the water foaming as the ship sliced through the water. And they were closing the distance to the whale. Ahab grabbed the railing so tight the knuckles on his hands were white. All he could feel was the thrill of the hunt rushing through him. The great whale, so massive, so monstrous, was almost within reach. As Moby swam faster, pursued by the ship, something inside him screamed to defend himself. The relentless pressure, the fear of being chased by something he didn't understand, boiled over into a wild defensive instinct. The presence of the ship felt like an ominous weight pulling on him, and he had to stop it. In one powerful sudden turn, Moby whipped around, his massive body surging toward the Pequod. His huge body arced as he came to the surface and slammed into the side of the ship with a bone-rattling crash. Moby felt the pain of the ship's harpoons as they struck his body, but the magic spell kept the dangerous weapons from harming him. Wooden planks exploded, and the ship lurched violently. Ahab was thrown backward, but his eyes never left the whale. He saw the great beast's huge, dark eyes fixed on the ship, fixed on him. Those eyes were wild, filled with panic and fury. Moby didn't know what he was doing. His world was the ocean. This terrible thing that was threatening him, and he had to stop it. He swam beneath the ship and quickly turned to strike it again. He rammed the hull of the ship as if shot out of a cannon. The power of his massive body sent waves crashing over the deck. And then, with a final terrible blow, his great tail struck the ship's wooden hull with such force that it broke beneath the attack. Ahab was thrown against the mast, and his world went dark. Moby turned to make sure it could not harm him again. Seeing that it was severely damaged and having no trouble staying afloat, Moby was confident it was dead. He softly drifted beneath the... He softly drifted below the surface and swam away. When Ahab awoke, it was the sound of screams and the icy cold of the ocean lapping his skin. The Pequod, his ship, was half sunk, its proud form broken and listing to one side. Pain shot through Ahab's body, and as he looked down, his eyes widened in horror. His right leg was half gone, ripped away beneath the knee by a force of the whale's final blow. "Captain! The whale! It's gone!" a crewmate shouted as he bent down to help Ahab. Ahab's head swam with dizziness, but his mind was fixed on one thought. The white whale. It had done this. It took his leg. His ship was ruined. His men scattered to the ocean. The beast had won and fled to the sea. He clenched his jaw, fury burning in his chest. But in his mind, the whale's eyes gleamed with malice, and the pain of his body felt like a mark of betrayal. The whale had done this to him deliberately. No, this was no mere animal. This was a force, a creature that had taken from him with vengeance and rage. He swore then and there that he would find that whale, that he would hunt it down. He would not stop until the beast lay dead beneath his harpoon. Years passed, and Ahab's obsession only grew. The white whale had become a legend, more than just an animal. It had become the embodiment of evil. All were reminded of Ahab's pain, anger, and loss. Captain Ahab had fought the tremendous white whale once before and lost his leg, crew, and ship in that encounter. Where his leg used to be below the knee was a polished bone from the sperm whale. The ivory was a warning and reminder to all. He would never be stopped until he had taken his revenge on the white whale. A new Pequod ship was built and named after its predecessor. The crew had changed, but Ahab's orders never did. Every day, every night, he ordered his crew to search the horizon. Look for the white whale was always his command. His ship had successfully hunted the whale after whale, but none were ever the one they sought. Then one fateful day, high on the mainmast, the lookout shouted. They had found it again, the white whale. Its massive body broke through the water. its presence impossible to miss. Ahab's eyes burned with a fierce light. "It's him," he shouted. "By God, it's him! Don't let it escape!" The Pequod gave chase once more. Ahab was determined. Moby tried to evade the ship, his mind clouded with memories of the first attack by this thing. Harpoons were thrown and the sea boiled as the chase continued, as the ship sliced through the surface of the sea. Moby, confused and overwhelmed by the relentless pursuit, turned to face the menace. When he attacked before, he had been frightened and confused. But now, faced with the memory of that past encounter, his anger rose once more. Moby repeatedly attacked the ship, ramming the hull time after time. In a final clash, Moby struck the Pequod with all the force he could muster. The hull cracked under the weight of that blow. The crew fought bravely to save the ship, but it was no use. It had sustained too much damage. Ahab alone stood at the helm and thrust his harpoon toward the whale with all his might. Ahab's final harpoon had found its mark on the side of the great whale. But in his haste, Ahab did not see the harpoon's rope wrapped in a tangled mess around his one good ankle. Moby turned and swam faster. He crashed through the ship, and the Pequod began to sink. Ahab's leg had unknowingly become entangled in the harpoon's rope that he had so desperately cast at the whale. As the whale swam, the rope tightened around his leg, and he was pulled off the sinking ship into the sea. Moby swam down ever deeper. Ahab realized he had lost everything to this monster. Try as he might, he could not untangle the rope that was so tightly holding his leg as the whale swam deeper and deeper into the sea. The last thing Ahab saw was the whale and the deep, dark waters of the ocean. As the Pequod sank, Moby rose to the surface to survey this thing that attacked him. Satisfied it was dead, he disappeared beneath the waves. He had tried to flee all that haunted him, escaping the world above. But once again his powerful had brought only destruction. He did not want to live with the weight of the chaos this curse had brought him. With a final thrust of his great tail, Moby turned and swam away from the wreckage. It is now many years later. His rage had robbed him of everything: his best friend, his family, his home. In his grief and fury, he had become something else, entirely a creature feared across the oceans. In stormy seas or calm, Moby had carved a path of destruction, his colossal body splitting waves and smashing through ships with a force that had taken many sailors. Seasoned sailors trembled at the mention of the whale. Tales of him had drifted from port to port, whispered warnings of the great white whale who could not be killed, who could not be stopped. They spoke of his eyes, dark and foreboding, filled with something terrifying. No weapon could hurt him, no net could hold him. For years the oceans belonged to him, and he alone ruled the seas. As the years passed, his anger softened, and he began to think of home. Maybe it was finally time he faced what he had done all those years ago to his beloved city, his mother, his best friend, and the king. Maybe it was finally time to go home, no matter what the consequences would be. With a deep, resigned breath, Moby slowly turned and started the long voyage to where it had all begun so very long ago. As he neared the familiar waters of Atlantia, the kingdom he had left in ruins, the weight of his guilt pressed on him, feeling heavier the closer he got to the city. Over the years, the rage inside him has slowly faded and cooled into a deep longing for home. His anger had given way to a desire for the people he had left behind. Even though he knew nothing could harm them, a knot of fear tightened within him. He knew King Neptune would likely imprison him, perhaps even order his death. Yet he understood he must finally face the weight of what he had done. Not far from the city's edge, he saw what he recognized as the king's guards. Moby drifted forward, his massive form casting a shadow over the group of royal guards. He recognized the armor immediately, the polished scales, the gleaming trident. These were the king's personal guards, an elite force trained to protect the throne at all costs. He let out a low rumble, announcing himself, and then waited, bracing for whatever may come. In the distance, he watched as one guard broke away and swam towards the city. Moby knew it was to inform the king. Moby felt the weight of his own heartbeat, steady and resigned. He knew the king's order could be his death, a fitting end for all he was done. And he was ready. But it was not the King Neptune he knew who emerged from the city to face him. Standing before Moby, wearing the gleaming crown and carrying the trident to the king, was Karith, grown but easily recognizable. Moby's heart stirred with a shock that sent ripples through his massive body. Karith, the prince, his best friend, the one he thought he had lost, is now the king? How? Moby was looking at a formidable figure, his presence every inch the ruler that Neptune was. The years had been good to Karith, his gaze steady and his bearing strong. But there was something familiar in his eyes, a warmth Moby thought he'd never see again. As Moby drew closer, he searched Karith's face, expecting anger, maybe hatred. But instead, Karith's expression softened, and with a great smile spread across his face. Slowly the king raised his hand, waved off his guards, and dismissed them with a calm authority that left Moby bewildered. Karith started to introduce himself to the whale, and was more than surprised when it spoke. As softly as he could, Moby greeted the king and his royal guards. The king smiled and bowed to the whale. Moby returned the gesture, almost knocking the guards. Moby returned the gesture, almost knocking half the guards to the ground. In the hours that follow, Moby learned the truth, a truth he had never dared to hope for. Karith had not died by his hand all those years ago. He had only been knocked unconscious in the fury of that confrontation. And even more astonishing, King Neptune had forgiven Moby long ago. Moby's act of stopping the assault on the palace had spared the kingdom. And with Karith alive, Neptune had chosen mercy toward the great white whale. As Moby and Karith spoke, the weight of the years between them seemed to dissolve. Their voices softened as they recalled the days when they were inseparable. Karith no longer questioned that he was talking to a whale. Both laughed as they recounted stories of their youth, of daring swims through forbidden caverns, and shared secrets beneath the shimmering kelp forests. As Moby listened, Hollow ache filled him as he realized what he had missed. It was Karith who spoke. "Come home, Moby. We've all waited far too long for your return." His eyes filled with a quiet hope. But Moby's gaze dropped and sadness shone in his enormous eyes. The memories he carried are too heavy, the past too deep. He had come home, but it felt like a place he may never get to see again. "Look at me," Moby says in his deep voice, filled with sorrow as he faced the king. "I'm a monster. I nearly destroyed the city we loved. How can I come home now, after all that I did? How can I come home after I killed my mother, father, almost killed you, the king's son?" Karith listened in silence, his expression calm but resolute. Then he raised his trident above him and stirred the water into a spinning vortex. His eyes never left Moby's as an almost joyful smile spread across his face. In a voice that echoed through the ocean, he began to speak the ancient words of magic, words that resonated with power as old as the sea itself. The water in the vortex shimmered and glowed with a strange, luminous energy. Slowly, an image began to take form within the whirlpool. Moby stared. He saw a great city that was taller and more beautiful than any he had ever seen. Towers of coral rose gracefully that were fantastic buildings, woven with lights that pulsed in vivid colors. The current swirled the sea gently around the city's edges, like arms cradling something precious. All about there were people happily living there. "Your actions spared us, Moby," Karith said, his voice strong but filled with warmth. "Atlantia stands, and it is ready to welcome you home." Before Moby could find the words, Karith caught the confusion in his eyes and spoke. "What you now see is what Atlantia has become, and it is all thanks to you." Moby stared at him, bewildered. I don't understand." The king's expression softened, and he lowered the trident, allowing the swirling water to settle. The image of the city faded. "There is something else you need to see," Karith told him, his voice filled with quiet purpose. Again he used the trident to spin a small vortex in the water. In it, Moby could see another image begin to appear. A building began to take shape. When the image was crystal clear, Moby's gaze sharpened as he recognized the building immediately. It was his home. It was where his father taught him first about magic, and where his mother began to soften those studies with lessons about Atlantia, its people, and his family's heritage. His heart ached as he watched this massive form utterly still. And then, as if summoned by thoughts, the front door opened, and an older merwoman stepped out. Her hair was streaked with silver, her face lined by the years, but he knew her immediately. It was his mother. She paused just outside the door, gazing upward, her expression gentle yet hopeful, as though she was waiting for something, or perhaps someone. The familiar look of a concern on her face, the way she walked, all unchanged, even after so many years. Moby stared, feeling a powerful surge of emotion. He had believed her lost, taken by his fury. Yet there she stood, alive and well. Her face glowed with a peace and quiet hope. Moby gazed at Karith in wonder, his eyes wide with disbelief. "What is this?" Moby asked. Is this some type of magic to punish me? No, Karith says softly. She has been waiting all these years for you to return. Every evening she stands outside her home, looking, hoping that one day her son, the hero of Atlantia, would return. Hero? Moby's voice was thick with confusion. Me? I nearly destroyed the city. I almost killed you. Karith nodded solemnly. True, you did a great deal of damage. It took many years to rebuild the city. But it was you who stopped the wizard and his army from taking the palace, our home, and our people. Moby was confused as ever. But that does not explain how I am the hero you said I am, Moby says. During the rebuilding of the city, Karith responded, we discovered a long-lost treasure beneath the city that even my father did not know about. It was in a hidden chamber beneath this main courtyard in front of the palace. That treasure is what we used to restore Atlantia to what you see now. Karith's gaze softened. We also found your father's library and its books, Moby. We learned of the spell you used and the spell that carried a terrible warning. It was still open to that page when the guards swam into the hole you must have made to escape the room. Moby's eyes dropped, shame shadowing his face. But Karith continued. His voice was steady and reassuring. You are no monster. Your heart has finally found peace. With the anger gone that kept you away, the spell you cast on yourself can be undone. Moby's voice trembled. I thought it was permanent. It used black magic. It can't be undone. Karith gave a small, knowing smile. I believe you missed reading an important part of the spell. It would have told you that the transformation was permanent only if the heart remains dark. The spell was fueled by... Read that over. The spell was fueled by anger, Moby. That is what kept you like you are for all these years. I could see the anger in your face as you swam away after I had been captured. But I see no anger in you now. All I see is regret and maybe a touch of missing home and friends. You mean I can return? I don't have to be this monster forever? Karith looked at Moby and raised his trident high, aiming it at the ocean's surface. A brilliant flash erupted from its tip, pierced the water, and shot high in the sky. Far above, the heavens darkened in seconds. Black clouds formed as hurricane winds howled, and waves rose like mountains. Dark clouds sent multiple lightning bolts striking at the ocean below, each bolt more powerful than the last. They all burst through the water, making it sizzle with its terrifying energy. All of them converged on one place, Moby. Each strike made Moby scream in agony as the powerful bolts struck him over and over. With each strike, Moby's body began to change, bathed in a blinding light that no one, not even Karith, could bear to look at. As the storm above subsided and the seas grew calm, the bright light that had surrounded Moby faded and revealed not a monstrous whale, but a tall, strong, handsome merman. Moby looked down at his hand, stunned, and then felt his face. With eyes wide and a look of astonishment, Moby glanced at his friend. Karith's face shared the same astonished look. There was a long hug between friends and a loud cheer from the palace guards. Moby could not believe it. It was finally over. He tried at first to speak, but his voice needed time to adjust to this new body. At first it was difficult to talk, but soon both were laughing and talking for hours, as if the years of separation had never been. When at last they returned to Atlantia, Moby swam beside Karith through the largest arch to enter the city, followed by the royal guards. Word had already spread about Moby's return, and the cheers erupted from every building and street as the people poured out to see their long-lost hero. Together with the guards' help, they were finally able to make their way to the palace. There, waiting for them on the grand steps in front of the palace entrance, stood the old king himself, Neptune, as regal and powerful as Moby remembered. The king's face showed a little more age, but there was no trace of bitterness or anger, only the pride of welcoming home a long-lost hero. A massive crowd had formed in front of the palace, cheering long and loud. But even as Moby bowed in respect to Neptune, his eyes scanned the people and searched for one face. "Where is she?" he whispered to Karith, his voice tight with longing. I don't see her." And then, from outside the massive crowd, far in the back, a soft voice finally reached his ears, a voice he had known since he was young and longed to hear once again. He looked hard, but there was no mistaking her face. It was the face of his mother, beaming with pride and joy. Though thousands were there, her gaze was all he could see. Moby tried to work his way through the crowd, wanting his pace to get stronger and faster with each person he passed. But everyone wanted to shake his hand or offer congratulations. All he wanted to do was get to his mother. Karith saw her and realized why Moby was trying to rush through the crowd. He ordered his guards to clear a path for Moby. The guards happily obeyed as they made an opening in the mass of people for Moby to get through. As Moby finally reached her, he gazed into her eyes and stood silent. He did not know if she still loved him after all he had done. He got his answer when she reached out, longing to hold her long-lost son. The look in her eyes told Moby all he needed to know. He wrapped his strong arms around her, and all Atlantia fell silent. She whispered to him, "I love you so very much, my son. I am so proud of you." Joy was on both of their faces as the great crowd realized what had happened and erupted in cheers. Then he saw Karith standing close by, and the three hugged tightly. The people erupted into a roar of celebration, a cheer so powerful it echoed through Atlantia's coral towers and far out into the open sea. In the days that followed, Atlantia overflowed with joy. Every street Moby and Karith swam through became the site of another celebration or feast. Each one honored the merman and the great white whale who saved their city. They showed Moby the now wondrous Atlantia, more beautiful than he could have ever imagined. The city had flourished since its rebuilding, filled with peace and prosperity, a golden era born from the treasure that Moby's sacrifice had revealed. Over the years, Moby learned to master the spell and his anger while using it. When Karith or the seas needed his help, Moby cast the spell to once again become the great white whale. Whether it was monsters from the deepest parts of the ocean, natural disasters, or attacking hordes from the furthest parts of the seas, Karith knew Moby would always be there to help. To this day, those who live on land and sail the seas know of the whale. Where it had once been feared, it became legend, as stories were told over and over how it rescued sailors from shipwrecks and terrible storms. And so, the legend of Moby Dick lives on, told and retold for generations among the merfolk of Atlantia. Eventually, the story found its way to the world above. The story had been incorrectly translated, with details changed and names altered. To land dwellers, he was known as Moby Dick, and the city was Atlantis. But beneath the waves, his true name and story remain honored for all time. For Atlanteans will never forget Moby, their hero who became the great white whale who saved the city. The end.